My family completely missed the most significant milestone in my life. There was no congratulatory call, no supportive message, not even a fabricated excuse. Just a deafening silence that reverberated deeply within me, shaking something to its core. So, when news of my company's valuation finally broke and my name began to circulate widely online, I honestly wasn't anticipating any acknowledgement from them. Yet, then my phone screen illuminated with a text from my father, a terse, almost theatrical message that read like a formal summons. Family dinner at 7 p.m., important discussion. As I gazed at that glowing display, I felt a distinct shift inside me. It wasn't hope, nor was it fear. It was something far colder. I understood then that this wasn't an olive branch, not a gesture towards reconciliation. This was merely the prelude to their inevitable reckoning. I was still ensconced in my office when that message appeared, the city lights shimmering behind the glass like an elaborate constellation draped across the vast skyline. My desk was piled high with countless papers, meticulously crafted plans, ambitious projections, binding contracts. But for the very first time, none of it felt like a burden. It had been an incredibly arduous journey to reach this point. Years filled with endless late nights, scrounging for borrowed desk space, and countless mornings waking up with the distinct imprint of my laptop keyboard etched onto my cheek. Now, the news of my company's groundbreaking valuation had finally broken. People were buzzing with excitement, investors were clamoring to connect, and after what felt like an eternity, I genuinely felt that the world was finally acknowledging me. My family, however, they had consistently viewed me through an entirely different lens. My father, Gregory, took great pleasure in constantly reminding me that real business involved tangible assets like bricks and land, certainly not little digital toys. My mother, Helena, found it much more convenient to simply pretend that my work was merely a transient phase, something I would inevitably mature beyond. Marcus consistently condescended to me, speaking as if he were imparting profound wisdom from a mountaintop he had, in fact, never even attempted to climb. And Dylan, well, Dylan's primary occupation seemed to be filming himself, patiently awaiting the universe to shower him with rewards simply for existing. So, when that familiar text arrived, family dinner at 7 p.m., important discussion. I knew with absolute certainty that this gathering wasn't truly about me, not in the slightest. It never had been. Yet, despite my certainty, a subtle hesitation stirred within me. A small, fragile part of myself remembered being 21, standing in a cramped college dorm room, clutching a dog-eared textbook, anxiously waiting for a good luck call that never materialized. It remembered the night I had to sleep in my car because rent was due, and my parents had dismissively told me that struggle builds character. This same persistent part, even now, after all the glowing headlines and countless handshakes, still harbored a faint, lingering wonder. What if showing up just one more time might, against all odds, finally alter our narrative? But hope, I had learned, could be a profoundly dangerous habit. I deliberately closed my laptop and reached for my jacket, choosing the plain, unassuming one I always wore to family gatherings. Blending in, I knew, was always far simpler than attempting to explain myself. My luxury SUV remained untouched, perfectly parked in the garage. Instead, I opted for the old sedan with its scuffed steering wheel and perpetually stubborn air conditioning, the very car my family recognized and associated with me. Presenting myself humbly, I had found, kept them comfortably predictable, and predictable people, I've observed, are prone to making mistakes. During the drive to the country club, a torrent of memories relentlessly resurfaced. Each recollection served as a stark, silent reminder of my long-established, marginalized position within our family hierarchy. I recalled the missed graduations, the perfunctory, half-hearted holidays, and the way their fickle attention invariably gravitated towards whichever family member happened to be shining brightest in their eyes at that particular moment. And I remembered the painful lessons learned, how I had gradually taught myself to shrink, to diminish my own presence, so their disappointment in me wouldn't seem quite so vast. But tonight, a new sensation settled over me. Tonight, I wasn't walking in, clinging to a desperate hope of being truly seen. I was walking in with an unshakable clarity, knowing precisely who and what they were. The country club perched atop a small hill at the city's periphery, its facade brilliantly lit, almost aggressively trying to convey a sense of importance. I maneuvered my sedan into a parking spot behind a flawless row of pristine vehicles, sleek, luxurious models in shades that exuded expense even in the fading light. My old car groaned its complaint as I shut the door, and for a brief moment I allowed my hand to rest on its roof, a quiet gesture of grounding myself. This venue had always felt like a neutral, impersonal territory, but not this evening. Tonight, it felt distinctly like a meticulously prepared stage, set for a performance whose script I already knew by heart. Inside, the polished marble floor amplified every single one of my footsteps. The air carried the distinct aroma of citrus polish and old money, a familiar scent from countless childhood events where I had invariably lingered at the fringes of conversations, never truly invited in. A young valet offered a perfunctory nod in my direction, then his gaze drifted past my shoulder, as if anticipating the arrival of someone far more significant. I simply continued walking. As I neared the private dining room, their voices reached me long before their faces came into view. I heard laughter, too quick, too practiced, the kind that serves to fill an uncomfortable silence rather than expressing genuine joy. When I opened the door, they all looked up in unison, caught abruptly mid-performance. My father was the first to rise, his smile overly wide, arms spread expansively as if I had just returned triumphant from a long war. "Rose! Finally!" he boomed. My mother approached, pressing a kiss to my cheek before immediately recoiling with a subtle furrow in her brow. "You look tired," she observed, her voice tinged with feigned concern. "Are you eating enough?" Marcus offered a knowing smirk from his seat, leisurely swirling a glass of wine while Dylan barely even bothered to lift his eyes from his ever-present phone. I settled into a solitary chair, conspicuously separated from the others, almost as if they had deliberately arranged it that way. Perhaps they had. The dinner began with the usual superficial family small talk, a thin, polished veneer that felt less like conversation and more like being subtly pricked with a butter knife. They inquired about my little company and my busy schedule, all delivered with tones that clearly implied they were merely humoring me. I nodded, responded with polite brevity, allowing them to play out whatever carefully constructed version of themselves they believed would disarm or soften me. Then Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing perceptibly. "So, your name made the news today," he stated, his voice carrying a fleeting hint of admiration, but predominantly a cold calculation. My father quickly chimed in. "Yes, quite the attention grabber," he continued. "Must be exciting," pronouncing exciting with the same underlying inflection someone else might use to say inconvenient. And that's precisely when it happened. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, the precise moment their elaborate performance began to falter. My mother exchanged a significant glance with Gregory, and Victor cleared his throat with the familiar, practiced sound he always made just before launching into a meticulously prepared pitch. I felt it immediately, that familiar tightening sensation beneath my ribs. An instinct honed over years of inadvertently walking into traps I didn't even recognize as traps until they had already sprung shut. My father leaned forward, pressing his fingertips together in a deliberate gesture. "We actually wanted to discuss something important with you tonight, Rose." There it was, the true underlying reason for my summons, the undeniable genesis of their unraveling. My father wasted no time. The instant those carefully chosen words, "something important," left his lips, the entire dynamic of the room shifted dramatically. The artificial warmth seemed to drain from the overhead lights. The shallow chatter ceased abruptly, and every single face at the table turned toward me, bearing the same quiet, predatory hunger. I had witnessed that particular look before, though not typically from my family. Rather, from investors who approached situations intending to seize, not to cultivate or build. Victor then cleared his throat, adopting the measured cadence of someone about to commence a formal seminar. "As you know," he began, meticulously smoothing the front of his jacket, "the motel group has been weathering some challenges." His voice carefully wrapped the word challenges in a layer of silk, as if articulating it more prettily might somehow diminish its catastrophic implications. Gregory interjected swiftly before I could even formulate a response. "We're on the brink of something truly significant," he declared, his voice brimming with a manufactured enthusiasm. "A complete transformation of the flagship property, a luxurious spa, elegantly upgraded suites, a proper event space, the works." I blinked slowly. A wave of incredulity washing over me. That flagship property was, in reality, practically held together by sheer willpower, frayed duct tape, and a heavy dose of misplaced nostalgia. Marcus then leaned forward, resting his elbows confidently on the table, an almost palpable arrogance oozing from him. This could be legacy-defining, Rose, he asserted. The kind of solid, long-term asset your digital thing simply can't hope to match. Digital thing! How utterly charming. My mother reached across the table, placing a hand on my arm, her fingers soft and subtly trembling. Honey, she cooed, her voice dripping with manipulative sincerity. This is a truly wonderful opportunity for you to become an integral part of the family's future, to finally give back. We've supported you for so long, it just feels right. Right. Of course. That would be her chosen word. All their eyes were now fixed intently on me, patiently waiting for the familiar version of Rose they had always known and expected. The quiet one, the unfailingly accommodating one, the daughter perpetually desperate for inclusion. Gregory then leaned further in, his voice dropping to a low, calculated business tone. We just need a bridge loan, he explained. A mere $1.5 million. You have access to credit, to new connections, to status. He uttered the word status as if it were a readily available faucet I could simply turn on for their convenience whenever they desired. We'll absolutely pay you back with interest, Victor interjected quickly. Once the construction financing comes through, this is truly a chance to buy into the family's empire. Empire? The word nearly elicited a sharp, disbelieving laugh from me, but I suppressed it. I remained perfectly still, observing the subtle sheen of sweat forming on my father's forehead, Victor's restless fingers drumming against his glass, Marcus's unnervingly bright smile. Even Dylan, for the first time, looked up from his phone, attempting a clumsy, supportive nod he clearly hadn't earned. There was a period in my life when I would have unequivocally crumbled under this relentless pressure, a time when my family's fleeting approval felt as essential as oxygen itself, a time when, tragically, I confused their deep-seated neediness with genuine love. But I was no longer starving for their validation, and I was certainly not an open vessel for them to feed upon. I carefully placed my napkin on the table, smoothing the fabric with deliberate, almost surgical precision. Then I spoke, my voice unwavering and steady. You skipped the biggest moment of my life, but you're all here for this. No one uttered a sound. The silence in the room pressed against my skin with a palpable, suffocating heat. My father's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Don't be dramatic, he snapped, his voice tight. This is about family. Family. The word landed between us with the dull, heavy thud of a dropped stone. I met his gaze, my own eyes calm and utterly unflinching. I didn't come here to rescue an empire you've already systematically burned to the ground. My mother gasped audibly. Victor visibly stiffened in his seat. Marcus's forced smile finally cracked, revealing the raw shock beneath, and somewhere, deep within my core, something irrevocably locked into place. A quiet, yet absolutely unshakable clarity settled over me. They imagined they were cornering me, but in truth, they had merely opened the very door I had been waiting for. The room seemed to collectively hold its breath after my last cutting sentence. For a fleeting moment, it felt as if the very air itself had frozen solid, as though even the hum of the air conditioning recognized the gravity of what was about to unfold and dared not interrupt. Gregory leaned back slowly in his chair, the last vestiges of his feigned warmth completely draining from his expression. So that's your stance? He demanded, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. You're actually going to sit here and lecture us about sacrifice, about commitment? Marcus scoffed, shaking his head dismissively. She gets a little attention online and suddenly believes she's above the family. My mother delicately dabbed her eyes with a napkin that, frankly, seemed entirely unnecessary. We're simply trying to include you, Rose, she pleaded. Don't twist this into something ugly. Something ugly. The irony was breathtaking. If only they possessed the capacity to see themselves with any measure of clarity. Victor then calmly folded his hands, adopting the infuriatingly patient, patronizing tone he typically reserved for his most nervous or difficult clients. Let's not escalate things, he urged. Look, Rose, $1.5 million is frankly pocket change compared to what your company's valuation suggests. This is a mutually strategic move for all of us. For all of us, I repeated, letting the words roll slowly, deliberately off my tongue, savoring the bitter taste of the inherent lie. Tell me, Victor, when exactly did you ever genuinely consider what was truly good for me? Was it that year I asked Dad for a little help with my very first rental lease? Or perhaps when I applied for my first business accelerator, and you so dismissively branded it a hobby dressed up as ambition? He stiffened noticeably. I was trying to guide you, he insisted defensively. No, I countered, my voice soft yet piercingly razor-sharp. You were trying to keep me neatly confined within the suffocating box you had meticulously built for me, but I stopped fitting in there a very long time ago. Gregory's fist tightened perceptibly around the delicate stem of his wineglass. We didn't come here to resurrect old grievances, he declared, his voice strained. We came here to build something real, something lasting. Something lasting, I echoed, my tone dripping with irony. Like the motel roofs that perpetually leak, or the broken heating system at the downtown property, or the mounting maintenance bills you've conveniently left unpaid for months. A profound silence suddenly shattered the polite facade of the room. My mother's face drained of all color. Marcus abruptly straightened in his chair, his previous confidence evaporating. Victor's eyes narrowed dangerously. Gregory merely blinked, momentarily speechless. How would you know? He finally managed to stammer. I pay attention, I finished for him, my voice calm. I always have. You just never bothered to pay attention to me. Dylan, who had been surprisingly subdued until this point, finally set his phone down with a soft clatter. Rose, what exactly are you saying? He asked, his voice betraying a hint of genuine confusion. I turned my gaze to him, then slowly back to all of them. I'm saying you're not looking for an investor. You're desperately looking for a lifeline. Victor's meticulously crafted, polite mask finally slipped, revealing a flicker of raw indignation. That's an outrageous insinuation, he protested. I calmly reached for my bag, my movements methodical and deliberate, like someone meticulously unwrapping a carefully rehearsed truth they were about to expose. I came tonight because I wanted to hear what story you were going to spin, I stated. And you certainly didn't disappoint. Same tired script, same transparent guilt tripping, same unshakable entitlement. Marcus leaned forward aggressively. Stop being so dramatic. If Dad says the properties are fine, then they're fine. Are they? I challenged, my voice calm. I then deliberately placed a thick, plain, unmarked folder on the table. Its weight felt substantial. I showed up with the one thing you never anticipated, I said quietly. The truth. Gregory's eyes narrowed, a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. What is that? He demanded. But before I could answer, the dining room door opened. Ava stepped inside. She always carried herself with an aura of quiet precision, her blazer impeccably pressed, her posture steady, her eyes missing absolutely nothing. Tonight, however, there was an even sharper edge to her presence, a palpable sense of purpose. She walked directly to me, completely ignoring the stunned, bewildered faces around the table. Everything has been finalized, she announced. The transfer is complete. My father sprang to his feet so abruptly that his chair screeched loudly against the polished floor. Transfer? Transfer of what? Ava calmly placed a formidable stack of documents directly in front of me. I then slid them across the table toward him. Your motel group, I stated, my voice flat. Your crippling debt, your outstanding payments, your property obligations, all of it. Victor's voice cracked audibly. That's impossible. The bank hasn't... The bank sold the debt, Ava interjected, her tone crisp and decisive, as early as last week, to a private investment entity. Gregory's face visibly crumpled in utter confusion. What entity? He stammered. I met his bewildered gaze directly. Mine. The room didn't erupt with noise. Instead, it ruptured with the profound absence of it. A suffocating implosion of silence. My father's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, his brain seemingly unable to form coherent words quickly enough. Marcus abruptly pushed his chair back, shaking his head in bewildered disbelief. Dylan whispered something indistinctly under his breath, a sound that could have been either a desperate prayer or a furious curse. My mother finally managed to speak, her voice trembling. Rose, what have you done? Precisely what you forced me to do, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. You wanted me to invest in an empire, but the stark reality is there is no empire. There is only crushing debt. Debt so profound and deeply entrenched that no responsible lender would dare to touch you. Victor snatched one of the documents and frantically began to scan its contents. His face visibly drained of color as the stark numbers stared back at him. Months of overdue bills, numerous contractor complaints, unresolved local compliance issues, and maintenance records so egregiously neglected they bordered on hazardous. This can't be right, he whispered, his voice barely audible. This isn't salvageable. It is, I corrected him gently, my voice firm. Just not by you. Gregory finally found his voice, thick with an almost palpable rage. You think you can humiliate me like this in front of my family? You think because you've made some money you can simply play God? I leaned forward slightly. I'm not playing anything, Gregory. I'm simply cleaning up the mess you systematically broke, and I am absolutely done financing the destructive illusion that you're still in control. Marcus exploded, his composure completely shattered. You blindsided us! You should have told us! Told you what? I countered, my question sharp. That I wasn't going to write you a blank check? That I wasn't going to be your personal bailout plan, arriving in heels? My mother attempted to intervene once more, tears finally overflowing and tracing paths down her cheeks. Rose, please, this is our life, our home. And it will continue, I said softly, my voice holding an undeniable edge of authority. But most certainly not under your management. Ava then smoothly slid one final envelope across the table. My buyout offer, I explained. $200,000. A clean, rounded sum, ostensibly enough for them to attempt a fresh start. It was, in fact, far more than the equity was actually worth. More, I knew, than they truly deserved. Gregory stared at the envelope as if it were a cunning trap. I'm not taking your pity money, he spat, his voice thick with wounded pride. It's not pity, I stated calmly. It's severance. He slammed his hand forcefully on the table, the sound echoing sharply. You are no daughter of mine. For the very first time in my entire life, those cruel words didn't land like a fresh, searing wound. Instead, they landed like a profound, liberating release. I stood up, meticulously smoothing my jacket. You're absolutely right, I said, meeting his furious gaze. I'm not the daughter you wanted. I'm the daughter you made. Marcus began demanding frantic explanations. Victor muttered darkly about impending legal challenges. Dylan softly swore under his breath, a mixture of shock and anger. But my father, Gregory, simply stared fixedly at the documents before him, his entire world visibly shrinking as the devastating realization dawned upon him. This was not, and never had been, a negotiation. I calmly stepped back, allowing their cacophony of noise to swirl and crescendo around me. They were unraveling precisely as I had anticipated, grasping desperately at straws, furiously blaming one another, shouting in bewildered rage. Ava silently opened the door for me. Before stepping through, I cast one final glance back at them, not with anger, nor with a sense of triumph, but with an unwavering, profound certainty. I didn't come here to save your empire, I stated, my voice clear and resonant. I came to end my part in it. And then, with that final declaration, I walked out into the cool night air, leaving their self-made chaos firmly behind. The crisp night air enveloped me like a sudden, cleansing reset button, cool, steady, and bracingly honest. Behind me, the muffled echoes of their chaos persisted, voices overlapping in a frantic mix of panic and blame. But out here, under the vast, open sky, everything felt profoundly quiet, clean, and undeniably real. Ava walked gracefully beside me toward the parking lot, her heels clicking a calm, measured rhythm against the pavement. You sure you're okay? She inquired, her voice not laden with worry, but simply present and observant. Solid, I confirmed with a nod. For the first time in years, that answer wasn't a rehearsed performance. I'm more than okay, I added softly. I finally stopped hoping they'd miraculously transform into people they were never truly capable of being. My old sedan still sat humbly in the far corner of the parking lot, but tonight I realized I no longer needed that particular disguise. Ava extended her hand, presenting me with the keys to my actual SUV, sleek, dark, unmistakably mine. You don't have to hide anymore, she said gently. As I unlocked the door, something profoundly heavy seemed to slip effortlessly from my shoulders. A complex melange of unfulfilled expectation, lingering guilt, and ingrained habit that had burdened me for over a decade. I settled into the driver's seat, luxuriating in the profound silence. No missed calls, no urgent demands, no guilt-laced bargaining attempts. My phone buzzed once, displaying my mother's number. I watched it illuminate. Flicker briefly, then fade back into darkness. I didn't answer. I didn't even hesitate. With a decisive swipe, I blocked the number, allowing it to vanish, just as their warped version of me finally had. As I smoothly pulled onto the main road, the city lights stretched out before me, blinking like countless tiny invitations to a life I had never truly allowed myself to fully imagine. Certainly not a life built around perpetually rescuing people who had never once intended to genuinely show up for me. For the very first time in my entire adult life, the future didn't appear intimidating or daunting. It looked expansive, entirely open, and I was finally free to walk into it without seeking anyone's permission or approval. They had always relentlessly told me that family was forever, but sometimes forever is simply the extended length of time you permit people to continually inflict pain upon you. Walking away from that country club, a simple, yet profoundly sharp realization crystallized within me. Love isn't measured by blood ties or familial obligation. It's truly measured by how consistently and genuinely people show up for you. And my family? They only ever showed up when they caught the scent of an opportunity that benefited them. So, if you've ever found yourself in the agonizing position of having to choose yourself over people who relentlessly continue to take from you, understand this. You are not selfish. You are simply surviving. If this story resonated deeply with you, please tell me where you're watching from.